Right, joining us now, we have Dr Will Flavell from the Henderson Massey Local Board and Councillor Tim Macindoe from Hamilton City Council. Good evening to both of you. First question, which has completely nothing to do with anything I sent out to both of you before. How are you guys holding up? Because I imagine you've had a fairly hectic week. Will, I know you've been down at Turanga Waiwai. Tim, I know you've been at Turanga Waiwai as well. How are you guys holding up with everything that's hit lately?
Yeah, I mean, it was both a sad but beautiful occasion to be at Turanga Waiwai Marae, and I say that it was you know, and I see my aroha to the whānau and to the hapu of Tainui, with the death of Kiingi Tuuheitia. But I guess a beautiful moment that came from the week was the appointment of his daughter as the new queen, Ngāwai Honui Te Pō. And so I think, you know, as a young Māori wahine leader, 27 years old. She will be able to connect strongly with our rangatahi, with our young people, and bring relevance back to the kingitanga, and I think that's really important. So yeah, I acknowledge Tainui, and for the Manaakitanga over the week, it's been really beautiful to see.
Yeah, I agree with Will, Paul. It's been obviously a sad week, a memorable week, but it's ended on a high with the announcement and the what's the right word? The blessing and the crowning of our new queen, only 27 years old. That's a huge responsibility. I was at Turanga Waiwai on Monday afternoon with local body politicians and others, including an Olympic delegation. Their speaker was very powerful.
There was an Olympic delegation there.
Well, Kiingi Tuuheitia had been to Paris for the Olympics just a few weeks ago, and they had very much appreciated that strong expression of support from him and came to pay their respects and return the favour. And in fact, I was not just over a week ago, early on Friday morning of last week, I was on the new bridge across the Waikato River in Hamilton, and the plaque there indicates that the bridge was being opened that day by Hamilton Mayor Paula Southgate, Transport Minister Simeon Brown, and Kiingi Tuuheitia, who had actually given his blessing to the name, beautiful Maori name of the new bridge. But sadly, of course, the news came in while we were there that he had died just a few hours earlier. So that cast quite a sad pall over the events. But the tribal leaders said he would want us to carry on, and they did, and it was still a very moving and obviously very memorable occasion for that reason.
The impact of somebody like Tuuheitia is obviously going to be something that's felt for a while. He had a really specific policy that he was trying to push, you know, kotahitanga, unity. Local government, to me, feels like the perfect place to push that and to see that realized, because it is communities choosing the people who make the decisions for within their communities. Is that something that you guys as elected officials with community roles feel that way, or do you see it slightly differently, having been on the other side of the stand, other side of the glass?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to head to Turanga Waiwai on Tuesday with Auckland Council, elected members and those who work at Auckland Council. And we did so, you know, under the umbrella of kotahitanga, manaakitanga, all those beautiful values that come from Tainui. And I guess the messages that the king, you know, they recently held the coronation, the coronation there, and some of those key messages around bringing people together, around unity. It's better to work together rather than be divided, and those messages really, I think, I really understood by, you know, particularly the communities I live in. You know, I live in West Auckland, so I think, you know, we're known to work together to help each other, you know, and I think that's really important to get that from someone like Kiingi Tuuheitia.
And I agree. I think that is the thing that he will be remembered for. Certainly the theme of the week has been kotahitanga. It was repeated by politicians across the political divide as being clearly a desirable objective, hard to achieve, but always something that should be underpinning efforts, because as Kiingi Tuuheitia often said, you know, we can come together, we may not agree, but the important thing is we sit and we talk face to face, get the issues out on the table, and quite often you can make much greater progress that way than if you're just taking pot shots from the sidelines or from some distance.
Pot shots from the sidelines is what I do best.
That's your job, Paul.
That's my job. Blake, do you have any questions before I completely dominate absolutely everything?
So, my question is, how well do you think everyone did it, like coming together? Because in the week before the king passed away, we saw that he was trying to focus really hard on trying to bring local and central government together. Do you reckon that succeeded during his tangi this week?
Yeah, I mean, the king, issued a number of challenges this year, particularly at the beginning of the year, where he brought, I guess, many around Māori, particularly Māori issues, and again at the coronation about the aim of working together. And what we saw is that we saw the political groups, they descended onto Ātūranga Waiwai, both at the funeral, the tangihanga, and also the coronation. And so the idea is that it provided an opportunity for those political parties to sort of maintain, what their initiatives will be to support, I guess, Te Ao Māori or Te Iwi Māori. And I think having those national conversations are important, and the need to be consistent with those, with speaking about those issues are really important. So I think that, and unfortunately, under the funeral, under the title of the funeral, that those conversations and messages were reverberated around the motu, around the country.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the new Queen is able to pick that up and run with it. Clearly, she has been, to some extent, an understudy to her father, and an articulate, intelligent person. Many, I'm old enough to remember her grandmother as well. Many will be hoping that she'll combine some of the talents of both her grandmother, who was universally loved, and I think earned huge admiration throughout the country for her style. Kiingi Tuuheitia has possibly been a more controversial figure because he's been inclined to dabble more in the political realm than Dame Te Ati Rangikahu was. But as I say, it'd be interesting to see how our new Queen picks up the chalice, and I'm sure that she will begin with a huge groundswell of goodwill, and that in itself is a really good way to get underway.
Just lastly, sorry.
No, go for it.
Just lastly, before we move on, what I found really reminiscent watching the King and the new Queen over the last couple of years is it's very reminiscent to me of the English monarchy, with how we saw Charles slowly taking over duties for Queen Elizabeth II. So, yeah, I noticed a lot of parallels with the new Mary Queen. So I found that quite interesting. I just wanted to know what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, you're right, Blake, and potentially there's sort of a bit of a comparable role for Atawhai to play as the Queen Mother now, because she clearly was a major partner in the 18 years that Kiingi Tuuheitia spent. She was constantly at his side, and now she has probably both the wisdom and the closeness to be able to be a great support to her daughter. And I think everyone would appreciate if that's the case as well.
Yeah, just to add on to that as well, it's not a there's a difficult selection process when choosing the next person in line. And so, as you may know, the new Māori Queen has two brothers as well. So the council of the Kingitanga decide who that is, and they've decided on of Ngāwai Honui Te Pō. And so, I'm looking forward to, I guess everyone's looking forward to what she has to bring, what she has to offer, and definitely a youthful perspective. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
Right, I was going to change the topic completely and talk about local governments. I figured I've got experts here. It's probably a good time to jump into that. There are 4 terms that I've got sitting here in front of me. Social well-being, economic well-being, environmental well-being, and cultural well-being. And these are the 4 pillars that are currently legislated for local government in this country as to what local governance is there to look after and do. I'm kind of curious from your perspectives, what do those mean to you?
That's a really, and yeah, it's a really interesting question, Paul. I think if I could use sort of one term to sort of underpin all the four pillars that you've talked about, I think connectedness, and I think connectedness is such an important aspect of local government. And I guess being here in Auckland Council, we're a little bit different from other councils because we have 21 local boards. They're not community boards; they're a little bit more power than community boards, but they're essentially they were legislated as local boards. And what that provided is an opportunity. We've got 130,000 people in our local board area now, so comparable to many city council sizes around the country. But our job really was to sort of advocate for local issues that pertain to those who live in my West Auckland local board. So I think about connectedness. I think about making decisions around it'd be around infrastructure, it'd be around roading, around community projects, community facilities, all those things that keep our community connected. So I guess that's the term that I would think about when talking about the four pillars.
And Paul, what you've of course identified is the four well-beings that the current government has signalled will no longer be part of the local government arrangement, or at least not formally required under the Local Government Act. And just for a little bit of history, they were initially brought in under the Helen Clark government, then taken out under the John Key government, then reinserted under the Jacinda Ardern government, and now they're coming out under the Christopher Luxon government. And so it does reflect a little bit of a different approach, I guess, between the two main parties that have led governments of the last 20 plus years. The question, and I don't speak for any particular party, although I am a former national MP, the current government is saying, well, local government is really struggling, debt is huge around the country, rates rises are huge. We want you, this is the government is saying, we want you, local government, to restrict your focus to the core functions that your ratepayers expect of you. So that's my answer, that, while there are all sorts of other things that can be done by councils that would come under one of those four pillars that you've mentioned, and actually I think in many cases still will be. I mean, the fact that they may not formally be legislated doesn't mean that councils just say, well, we're no longer interested in social or cultural well-being. Most people would say that not to be concerned with cultural well-being means that you're not concerned on providing a city that's really appealing, or a town or a district that's appealing to live in. And I don't think there'll be many local government politicians who say, well, I'm not interested in that. It's just, I don't want to be under a legislative requirement to have to go further than we are able to at the moment. And I think that's probably where the divide comes in. I don't know that a huge amount will change, but it is just a message from government. Hey, you really need to hone in on the core responsibilities of local government, particularly during the tough economic times we're in at the moment.
With the two different types of local government areas that you're in as well, but you've got very different sort of infrastructures. Tim, you're obviously sort of at the top. You don't have local or community boards in Hamilton. Well, you're not right at the very top as the council, but you have such a strong interconnection with the community, and you work with that top level of the council. How do you think those sort of changes, or what sort of changes do you think are going to occur over the next 12 months that the public might not be aware of, or that the public are acutely aware of, that's going to sort of shape the narrative that we look going into the next local body election?
I guess, if I look at Henderson, massey, with a local board population of 130,000, very diverse. So, for example, 20% Māori, 22% Pacifica, 20% Asian. So we're very, very diverse. And so, those four pillars are very strongly needed in our community. How do you sort of, I guess, kutahitanga, and that's a really important thing of bringing people together, because communities are very different, and I think it's really important to make sure that we cater for the different communities that we have here in West Auckland. And so, I do worry about those changes because, it's very obvious that we make decisions that are more than just your rubbish and then your roads, etc. I think about pockets of deprivation here in West Auckland and how can we cater for them in terms of supporting and funding our youth providers, our community hubs, those community organizations that apply for funding for food grants and food drives and putting on dinners for our community and ensuring that the well-being of our community is looked after. So there are worries or there are concerns if we just focus on what has been perceived as the real issue, the real tasks of councils.
Mm. And here in Hamilton, you mentioned before, Paul, that we don't have community boards, and you're right, although I'm a very strong advocate for them and am sort of beginning a bit of a debate here. I don't enjoy a lot of support around the council table, but I actually believe that there's a strong argument for them out in our communities to ensure that different communities are heard and feel represented around the table. Many of the things that Will has just mentioned, of course, are funded by our council. We've got initiatives that are both for and led by rangatahi. The Hamilton City Council is a major investor in our new regional theatre, which is a wonderful cultural attraction that should cater for a wide range of artistic and cultural performances. A condition of the investment from the City Council, it's not a council-owned facility, but we're a major investor, is that it will be available for community, not just for arts up at the sort of top end or the elite end. I agree with a lot of what Will was saying before. I don't feel as worried that by changing the law that there will be a huge amount that is lost, but it is all about saying, well, start with the things that you as local body authorities must do, and then when you have the fiscal wherewithal, branch outwards, rather than being required to have this huge range of activities that you're doing, which may or may not be considered affordable at the current time. And it's not just about sort of taking an accountant's perspective on things, but we're borrowing a huge amount every day just to cover our debt at the moment. With the interest on our borrowing is huge, and we can't carry on the way we are. Something has got to be reined in, and our ratepayers would, I think, always say, but make sure you don't cut the core services and keep making it an appealing place to live.
Actually, that brings up a question I've got for you, Will, because I know how Hamilton City Council works in terms of funding. How does Henderson Massey work in terms of funding? Because I should know this. I get paid by you guys sometimes, so I should probably work out where the money's coming from.
Yes, so the original intention of the Auckland Super City was shared governance between your, the members on the council table, so the governing body table, and also the 21 local boards. And so, unfortunately, local boards across Auckland get very minimal funding from the governing body table on what we can do in terms of the projects that we can work on. So I think we do pretty well with the very minimal funding. I think it's sort of like perhaps 1 to 2% of the total funding of what Auckland Council gets goes towards what local boards can spend. Very, very minimal budgets, but I think we do pretty well. What we do also is we make recommendations to the governing body on bigger issues, perhaps that we don't have the final decision making over. For example, I know Māori wards, for example, are a contentious issue around the country. So what we can do is that we can make a recommendation on what we believe Auckland Council should see Māori representation, but we don't have that final decision making. So perhaps we've got less powers than the governing body, very less funding. But I think, for us compared to those who sit at the governing body table, I think we're more visible in the community and we advocate for the community. The community comes to the local board members on the issues that are important to them. It could be sort of environmental issues, roading issues, street lights, footpaths, parks, etc. So I guess that probably, as you know, Paul, that's probably the work that we do.
Interesting perspective. I in the short time I've been involved in local government, have formed a very clear view that we sort of have unofficial community boards. There are some very strong advocates in different parts of our city, and often they're sort of geographic in the sense that they might be a suburb, but sometimes they're more communities of interest. It might be rangatahi, it could be elderly people, could be Maori. I mean, the whole range of different things. And I often feel that they are much more effective advocates for their interests and the things that are priorities for them than what I consider to be the fairly artificial ward system that we have. I'm currently an East Ward councillor, but when I sit around our table, I'm not really speaking specifically for the East Ward, and I don't often hear other councillors advocating specifically for the ward that they represent. Whereas I think if we had community boards, we would definitely be hearing, hey, these are the concerns of our community. And we are hearing that unofficially. One of the reasons I'd like to see us move towards recognising community boards and giving them a little bit of funding is to sort of pay them the respect of acknowledging the work they already do.
Just going back to community boards, I actually agree with you, Tim. I think they should be all over the country. I think they're just as valuable asset as the debate around Maori wards is going at the moment. I reckon they should be in every council across in some capacity. Maybe not the amount that some of the bigger ones have, but maybe in a smaller amount, because they were a great asset to the community too. Mm-hmm. Yes, they're not able to be have as much power as your councillors, but they're the neat best thing, and I think there are, and some people may disagree, I reckon they're a very valuable asset to the community, and I would like to see more of them.
I agree, Blake, and I see a comment that's just come up in the chat line that community boards are a good place for brilliant councillors to start, and I agree with that. I think they are potentially a really good training ground for those who might aspire to go to other levels of local or even central governance. And we here in Hamilton, I think, are in the minority in not having them. I'm interested actually perhaps in having a chat with Will offline about his experience of at the local boards as opposed to community boards, because they are separate. But I guess to some extent that reflects just the huge nature of the Auckland super city. I am just very keen to see us follow the lead of the majority of other territorial authorities around the country.
Yeah, I guess sort of one, so this is my 4th term on the Henderson Massey local board, and sort of one sort of thing that sort of bugs me is that, we don't have the final decision making on some of the big issues here in the Henderson Massey area. It goes back to the governing body. Yeah. So you've got people there who make decisions based on, sometimes they go against the advice that we give as elected members to our local board area, and it just feels really, feels really wrong that you've got councillors from other parts of our city having the final decision on an issue that's really important to us, and that's actually very different from what we believe in. So that's probably my bear bug for the last few terms anyway.
We're now 13 months out from the next local body election. So fingers crossed nobody quits in the next month and triggers a by-election anywhere around the country.
Certainly not in Hamilton.
No, you guys have had, 2 in the last term? It's been...
Two since February. Yeah, 2 resignations. Yeah. 2 by-elections triggered by resignations.
Yeah, so people get electioned out, I think, a little bit when that sort of thing happens, and that's why you start to see these declines. I'm kind of curious, though, what being so far out from the election, and Tim, I realise this is probably your first time going into re-election for local body, but Will, you've had a bit of experience with this. How far out can you see what the issues are going to be that crop up in that next election, and what sort of insights do you have as to what they are going to be next year?
I can answer that. I mean, I think generally You know, the issues sometimes are pretty consistent. You know, our communities want great parks to be able to walk and play in. They want great library services. You know, we're lucky enough in Henderson, Massey, in every suburb, we've got a community hub that provides, you know, services and activities and sport facilities. And so generally they tend to be, you know, consistent issues across the 4 terms anyway that I've served. But I guess, you know, what creeps in is the cost of living. That's huge. It's really difficult on what a local board can do to really support that, the cost of living. You know, we try and put on as many, you know, free events, community events as possible. You know, movies in the park. Or, you know, we get hundreds that, you know, come to support that. You know, Christmas in the park, matariki events, and all those beautiful things that bring our community and connecting us together. So I think, you know, that also provides some, you know, sort of, you know, fun activities for local whānau. So I think the community expects us to carry on with that. But generally, ways that we can alleviate the cost of living at a council level, that's probably one of the biggest issues as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think that economic factors are probably going to dominate the thinking of most voters at the local government election next year, because right around the country you're seeing local authorities that have signalled massive rates hikes. Those that are not double-digit are very few in number. Here in Hamilton, we've just put rates up by 16.5% this year, signalling almost as much as for an increase next year. You know, the impact of this on people at all levels is pretty huge, and it is not just for our residential ratepayers, but also for our commercial ratepayers, many of whom are saying you're rating us out of our city. So I think those sorts of issues are going to be really important. If you were asking this with a Wellington local body person on, almost certainly they'd say, well, I guess which one of us can promise to fix the pipes in a way that doesn't cost a fortune, but does make sure we get the water flowing safely and well. Waters reform is obviously a big issue, just as Three Waters was controversial. Now we've got the local water done well policy. All of us have to come up with our plans in the near future for how we're going to deliver certainly 2 of the 3 waters separate from councils. So, yeah, these are some of the big issues that will come up. But also, I acknowledge the things that Will was talking about before are important, because they are what make living in areas appealing. And I don't think there'd be many councillors who'd go out and say, well, I'm not interested in ensuring that we have wonderful parks and gardens and cultural attractions and sports fields and all the rest of it. In fact, if they were saying that, I think you'd be turned off by it, because...
Have you met your co-Eastwood Hamilton councillor, Andrew Bidder, by any chance? He's exactly the same kind of person who was sit there going, as long as I'm a landlord and I'm making money and you're not taking the vaccine because it will cause you to die, and Liz Gunn is the most amazing person ever. I don't know if he's a big fan of things like parks.
Well, I can tell you that vaccinations are certainly not going to be an issue that I will be talking about anytime soon.
Fair enough.
Okay. Hey, look, I'm only speaking for myself, really, but I also do believe that the vast majority of people who enter into local government want the best for their cities or their districts, and they recognise that in doing that, you have to get the balance right between not making rates unaffordable, but also not neglecting both your core infrastructure and the other things that make it appealing to live in your particular part of the world.
Now, I have one more question for you then, which sort of ties back into that and back into what we were discussing a little bit before with kotahitanga. Do you feel, because this is my own personal feeling, that councils very much have a better opportunity to represent a wider community's opinions? Because obviously in government, because we have a party-based system, people toe the line when they're in the party. But central or local government doesn't necessarily have to do that in the same way. I know Hamilton's never been a big one for party-based politicking. I know Auckland's a little different. There is a little bit more of that sort of tribalism there. But I'm wondering what your views are on that.
Will?
Okay. So I'm a Labour elected member, and so yeah, and so for me, what that means is that, you know, when people, you know, choosing who to vote for local government elections, you know, you have no idea what the values of that person are. You've got, you know, you rely on a 150-word blurb. So for me, if they see sort of, you know, a Labour person, they sort of, you know, hopefully understand the values of that particular person, and I guess for any other political party. So we've always had different political parties and local government here in Auckland. So yeah, so that's the aim. In terms of tribal, you know, what I do is that, you know, I'm not dictated how I vote. You know, I'm a Labour elected member, but nobody in Wellington tells me how to vote. I'm very strongly connected to my community, the diverse communities. And so I work with those communities to determine the best options for them. And you know, what I'm really proud though is that, you know, out of the 8 elected members on the Henderson Massey local board, you know, we've got, you know, national and, you know, New Zealand first, you know, political members, and they happen to be some of my best friends, and I love working with them. And that's the beauty. We can work together well, and that's what West Auckland expects of us. And so, and I'm really proud of that success.
And equally, I'm enjoying working with people of different political backgrounds. While there are aspects of local government that I find frustrating, I stood as an independent, and one of the things I particularly enjoy about it is that I am genuinely independent. I don't have to agree with anybody else around the table at any time. I can form my own opinions. Obviously, I try to ensure that I become informed by talking to my local community. Because I'm a former national MP, sometimes people say, well, you must be a national local body politician, but actually the National Party doesn't put forward people for local government, and I was neither encouraged nor supported by the party to do so. I had hoardings in the by-election that were blue and green because I wanted to emphasise the fact that I was very keen to ensure that we recognise the importance of our environment. I guess I come from a fiscally conservative background, you'd expect that, but I'm proudly independent, and I don't answer to anybody other than the voters who put me there, and that's the way it should be.
Fantastic. Anything you want to wrap up with there, Blake, before we let everybody go for the night?
Yeah, Jeff, thank you for coming, and it's nice to talk to you both again.
Thank you, Blake.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Good to meet you, Will.
Yeah. Hopefully we get to talk outside of this.
I'll give you guys each other's contact details so you can sit down and have a chat, and then I will arrange so we can all catch up for coffee sometime.
Excellent.
So and next time out west.
Thanks for this opportunity, and thank you to those who have been following us online. I hope that you've found it vaguely interesting, or even more than vaguely interesting.
Really great chat coming through. Very great chat coming through. Okay. All right, guys, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Keep day.
Keep day.